Doesn't it suck finding an MMO to play and then realizing that it's no longer populated? Maybe it's just me, but honestly, scouring the internet for an MMO, especially this year, has been a chore. More MMOs have shut down this year than I recall in the last several, and that's partly a result of the shift in market. So when what's left of the player base is no longer as distributed between a variety of MMOs as it once was, we're left with a mere handful of games to play. And that's what this video is aimed at, letting everyone know where everyone else is and what everyone else is playing. I'm aware that the games currently active haven't really changed much over the course of the year, so do be aware of that. Now, before we get into this video though, I am going to be doing a really large giveaway lasting until Christmas. I'll be giving away copies of Final Fantasy XIV and all the expansions, Elder Scrolls Online and all the expansions, Arcade Unchained, the new Guild Wars 2 expansion, and even a copy of World of Warcraft as thanks for just being part of this community. To participate, all you need to do is navigate on over to my website at MMOByte.tv. You'll find the link in the description and the pinned comment. This is hundreds of dollars worth of MMO gaming, so make sure you join in if you're interested. I'm gonna go ahead and start this off with the Elder Scrolls Online. 2019 was a big year for MMO expansions. More specifically, back in June, ESO released their brand new Elsewhere expansion, taking us to the home of the Khajiit. I have been a huge fan of the Elder Scrolls games since Morrowind. That to date is still one of my favorite games. Oblivion and Skyrim are amazing games in their own right, don't get me wrong, but nothing has really captivated me like Morrowind did. I poured, I think, probably 800, maybe 1,000 hours into Morrowind. And the amount of mods I downloaded for that game, man, to this day, I still can't fathom how I invested that much time into a game. Speaking specifically of player population, pre-Elsewhere expansion, ESO had a total player base of around 11 million players. This doesn't equate to total concurrent players or players actively playing per month, but just that there are overall 11 million registered accounts. Post-Elsewhere expansion, numbers were sitting at over 13.5 million total players registered. That is a whopping 2.5 million new players this year alone. This does not account for new trials, only players who have purchased the base game. So while we don't have any exact concrete numbers, it is safe to say that the Elder Scrolls Online's population numbers are very high right now. That isn't to say that they have held that high or that next year they're going to retain nearly as high numbers, but at least right now they're holding well. According to reports, the Elder Scrolls Online is approximately 85,000 daily active players. I am well aware that both RuneScape 3 and old school RuneScape are very different beasts with very different player bases, but this will be totaling the two variants together. While RuneScape is no doubt a very old MMO, the fact remains that it is not only the most populated old school MMO ever released, but it also has absolutely no competition from fans of the genre interested in a classic MMO experience. Exact numbers for RuneScape are known because they're made public, and the numbers might surprise you a little. Not only does the game have over 100,000 players playing concurrently at a given time, but over 80,000 of those players are playing old school RuneScape as opposed to the more updated, overhauled RuneScape 3. Over 100,000 players for a game that is almost 2 decades old. That is the kind of community RuneScape has amassed over the years. While the game may not necessarily be your kind of game visually, while the game may not be up to your standards in 2019, there is no denying the appeal it has to the masses. According to reports, RuneScape has approximately 250 to 350,000 daily active players. Admittedly, Final Fantasy XIV is actually one of my favorite MMOs of all time, with the game specifically being the MMO that I have mained since December 2018. I am a huge Final Fantasy fan. I have been playing Final Fantasy games since I was a kid. I have played almost every single Final Fantasy game ever released, as I'm sure that a lot of the Final Fantasy XIV players likely have as well. Now, at the beginning of 2019, Square had openly revealed that there were 14 million registered accounts in-game. Now, don't be confused, however, that does not mean that there are 14 million active players, as some of you, for some reason, believe. That means that there were 14 million people that have registered accounts and logged in with a character. Although I'm sure some of you are still, no doubt, going to fight this opinion, Square themselves have commented that that is exactly what those numbers mean. So please do not confuse those statistics. According to Square, prior to Shadowbringers' release, there were over 16 million registered users, and we know that millions of copies of Shadowbringers were sold. While they have yet to confirm that there are over 17 million registered players by this point, it's highly likely that over the few months of Shadowbringers' existence, there have been quite a few additional purchases. According to reports, Final Fantasy XIV has approximately 400,000 or more daily active players. I'm well aware that some of you would classify Black Desert as more of an MMO simulator, for lack of a better word, because a lot of players AFK farm. But even so, there's quite a significant player base present and they enjoy the game for what it is. The game has now launched on, or is at least planning a launch on, every single major platform. With these combined numbers, they have compiled one of the largest communities present in an MMO. Back in 2017, Black Desert Online had 3 million players. As of 2019, due to the success of the game on Xbox and PS4, the game is sitting at almost 7 million total players. While that isn't indicative of total concurrent players, it's quite the number for a game that is as, I guess, openly ridiculed and hated as BDO. According to reports, Black Desert Online has approximately 150,000 daily active players. However many of those players are AFK farming remains up for discussion though. Dungeon Fighter Online is a little different. See, in North America, the game is generally considered a low population MMO. It has thousands of players playing, but when you compare a few thousand active players per day to other much larger MMOs that have hundreds of thousands, you can see how people would label it as such. However, North America isn't where the game is neither popular nor successful. See, Dungeon Fighter Online has a player base of over 600 million players worldwide, grossing over $12 billion thus far over the course of its life. According to Nexon, DFO had upwards of 3 million concurrent players in China alone, and over 25 million active monthly players just a few years ago. Considering earnings and player base numbers have continued to scale upwards, it's likely that in South Korea and China, there are so many players playing the game that it would make our English-speaking MMO community seem insignificant comparatively. According to reports, Dungeon Fighter Online has approximately several million daily active players. I'm going to be listing both ArcAge and ArcAge Unchained as one single unit here, as I did with RuneScape. Although this will still be quite different to the aforementioned games purely because we don't have solid numbers, but instead have only speculation to base this off of. ArcAge itself, to this day, has thousands of active players per month. Not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but a few thousand. This is due to the heavy pay-to-win present in game that Gamigo, the current publisher, aims to actually eliminate by launching ArcAge Unchained as a buy-to-play alternative to ArcAge. There are a significant portion of players that aim to come back once the game launches in October, with plenty of new players interested as well. The subreddit alone has lit up with activity, increasing 10 to 20 times overall. Although numbers are currently impossible to really estimate, you can guarantee that tens of thousands of players will be playing once a game comes out, even if only temporarily. Like Dungeon Fighter Online, Phantasy Star Online 2 is somewhat of a different audience. Right now, the game is currently played by a significant majority of Japanese players. The game is available in Japan after all, so that's a given. However, with Microsoft's announcement that they would be releasing PSO2 in North America next year, interest in the game has gone up quite drastically. While yes, there are quite a few North American and European players present in-game, they're still a minority. There are currently hundreds of shards though, and tons of servers, all packed with people concurrently playing. Exactly how many is impossible to really discern, however, Sony has never publicly addressed the population of the game. Back in 2015, they did mention that the game had over 3.5 million registered users, but that was about as far as they went. Since that is unquestionably lower than ESO or Final Fantasy XIV or other games that have in the tens of millions, it's safe to assume that the population is also marginally lower. Therefore, we're likely looking at around 30, maybe 50,000 daily active players. But again, that is just purely speculation. EVE Online targets a very niche audience, people interested in sci-fi MMOs. While all of the aforementioned MMOs in this list are MMOs that target the general audience as a whole, EVE, Star Wars The Old Republic, and Star Trek Online are all very niche specific, therefore don't really garner the same attention or the same audience. But that's more than fine, since those of us that do enjoy sci-fi MMOs all kind of flock to the few that are dominating the niche anyway. At its peak, EVE was sitting at over 500,000 daily players. Last year, the game transitioned over a free-to-play model that saw a large influx of new players flock to the game. Sources were recording upwards of 150,000 players being active per day at that time. The last 24 hours has seen approximately 30,000 players log in and play, but according to reports, the game averages around 35,000 daily active players. Estillia just launched after having their head start available for the past week. From my impressions, the game is a beautiful but ultimately very generic MMO that probably won't last more than a few months. Nevertheless, as of this list actually going live, Estillia has sold tens of thousands of copies of the game, with tens of thousands of active players playing this very moment. That makes for quite a large concurrent player count, more so than a lot of other MMOs on the market right now. And while again the population may drop by a large number over the coming months with people hitting endgame, especially if updates aren't really rolled out fast enough, the fact remains that the game will still be populated enough to enjoy right now. Alright, so you all know that WoW was going to be here. With the release of Classic WoW, subscription numbers have soared for Blizz. Since it's impossible to individually give out numbers on Battle for Azeroth, I figured I'll just go ahead and group the two together, because honestly, they're both using the same subscription anyway. Battle for Azeroth has sold more than 3.4 million copies on its first day. For comparison, Wrath of the Lich King sold 2.8 million and Burning Crusade sold 2.4 million within their first 24-hour launches respectively. Clearly, anticipation for Battle for Azeroth was almost uncontainable. At the launch of the expansion, Battle for Azeroth had a total of over 10 million players playing, as confirmed by Blizz themselves, with Wowhead stating that there were actually over 11 million the last time that they reported on it. That dipped down to approximately 3 to 4 million over the course of its run, but then Blizz released WoW Classic and that saw a resurgence of popularity. According to statistics from Wowhead, there were over 2.5 million players playing WoW Classic at launch, bringing the grand total player base of both games up to anywhere between 5 to 6 million total monthly players. While it's likely a stretch to assume that there are millions of players logging in daily, we can safely assume that there are millions logging in at the very least weekly, meaning that WoW is still currently the most actively played MMORPG in 2019. Like the results or hate them, you can't deny that WoW and WoW Classic's combined population numbers have allowed them to remain the most played MMO this year. If you're looking for an MMO to play, then this list will no doubt give you the information you need to decide which MMO to download based off of population numbers. However, please be aware that just because a game is played by a large number of people doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily appeal to you. And that's the state of the MMORPG market right now. What do you guys think? What's your favorite MMORPG? What do you enjoy most about it? Is there anything here that you have yet to try? Let me know in the comments below and let's talk about it. Anyway guys, that is it for me. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this and I'll see you all next time. Peace.